Did you know the FBI once subjected handguns to brutal abuse, smashing trigger guards, flinging pistols like flying discs, and unleashing a torrent of gunfire in their quest to select a new standard-issue sidearm? Strangely enough, the firearm that ultimately won wasn't the most precise, the most durable, or the best performing in any category. So how did they end up choosing that one? In this video, we're diving into the bizarre and fascinating story of the FBI's 1987 handgun trials, where 9 contenders were put through the ringer. We'll explore why their final choice baffled gun experts and how the true standout almost slipped through the cracks. Some of the tests felt more like sideshow stunts than legitimate evaluations, yet they played a major role in shaping law enforcement recommendations nationwide. Each handgun faced grueling challenges, but the results were distorted by subjective opinions, outdated beliefs, and a clear fondness for the .45 ACP. We'll examine all 9 firearms, break down their strengths and weaknesses, and uncover how the FBI's decision-making process was anything but objective. Let's start with the least impressive model and work our way up to the one that forced the agency to question its own questionable logic. The Smith & Wesson 459. At first glance, the Smith & Wesson 459 looked like it had real potential. Chambered in 9mm, it delivered moderate recoil control, decent accuracy, and generally acceptable performance during evaluation. However, a few issues emerged that ultimately kept it from standing out. One particularly concerning incident involved a rear sight falling off during a test run, hardly ideal when you're trying to qualify under pressure. The FBI also raised red flags about the long-term durability of the alloy frame, warning that with extended, hard use, cracks could develop over time. While the pistol's accuracy was solid, it didn't impress enough to make up for those concerns. Reliability sat in the middle of the pack, averaging a malfunction about every 500 rounds. Not terrible, but not a standout either. Agents familiar with traditional double-action pistols appreciated the 459 conventional controls and layout. The double-stack magazine offered a respectable capacity for the time, which gave it a bit of an edge during an era when high-capacity pistols were still relatively novel. But several things held it back. The sight failure hurt its score, concerns over the frame's longevity weren't easy to ignore, and perhaps most importantly, it was a 9mm in a room full of 45 devotees. Many in the FBI clung to the belief that only a .45 ACP had the necessary stopping power for duty use, so any 9mm option faced an uphill climb. In the end, the 459 was a competent service pistol, but it lacked the standout durability and reliability needed to crack the top of the list. The Glock 19. Yes, there was a time when the FBI questioned the Glock's reliability, and it happened during these very trials. The Glock 19 took a hit in scoring, largely because agents logged failure to lock back on empty as a malfunction. Most likely, this issue wasn't the gun's fault at all, but rather a result of shooters unintentionally resting their thumbs on the slide, stop lever, something that interfered with its proper function. Compounding the issue was the FBI's unfamiliarity with striker-fired triggers. They were used to double-action pistols with long, heavy first pulls, so the Glock's consistent, lighter trigger press felt strange, maybe even risky to some evaluators. In fact, at least one accidental discharge was reported during testing, possibly caused by someone underestimating how easily the trigger could be activated. Despite all that, the Glock 19 had few, if any, real problems with feeding or extraction. Shooters who didn't interfere with the slide stop found it quick, smooth, and easy to get back on target. Its compact size made it especially attractive to agents who wanted something more manageable than the full-size options, though. In the 80s, bigger is better was still the reigning philosophy in many departments. In hindsight, the FBI's lukewarm reception seems out of step with how the Glock 19 would later dominate the law enforcement and civilian markets. But at the time, it scored only modestly, penalized more by misunderstanding and unfamiliarity than actual flaws. Looking back, it's clear that this was a case of a forward-thinking design being ahead of its time. The SIG P226. This is where Sig Sauer made its comeback. Unlike its .45 caliber sibling, the P226, chambered in 9mm, proved to be a major asset in an endurance-based evaluation. It managed over 600 rounds between malfunctions, an impressive stat that placed it near the top in reliability. Accuracy results were also strong, though some agents had to adjust to its heavier double-action trigger and slightly unconventional sights. One drawback? It didn't fare well in the infamous trigger guard hammer test, an extreme measure that, for better or worse, the FBI insisted on applying across the board. Still, aside from that, the P226 earned praise even from die-hard big-bore fans. Its performance would later be validated on the global stage, with military units and elite law enforcement agencies adopting it for serious duty use. Despite its solid showing, the P226 ultimately lost points and was ranked behind some .45s, likely due in part to the import penalty mentality that still influenced certain scoring categories. It's hard to ignore that some evaluators were hesitant to fully embrace a European-made 9mm. Nonetheless, the P226 stood tall, proving that capacity, control, and consistency often outweigh raw caliber size. Today, it's remembered as one of the finest duty pistols ever made, and rightfully so. The Glock 17. Here's the handgun that quietly dominated where it mattered most, the FBI qualification course. Agents posted their best shooting scores with the Glock 17 largely thanks to its smooth, predictable trigger and superb recoil management. However, the official reports claimed frequent malfunctions, most of which were simply failures to lock back after the last round. These weren't mechanical defects but likely caused by shooter grip interfering with the slide stop. True reliability issues were practically non-existent, but a few accidental discharges, mostly due to unfamiliarity with the lighter, consistent striker-fired trigger, negatively skewed its perception. The Glock 17 was ahead of its time, a lightweight polymer frame, a 17-round magazine, and a simplistic design that was easy to clean, easy to shoot, and easy to maintain. If the agency had provided more tailored training, many of the so-called issues might have never occurred. Ironically, not long after these tests, the FBI would circle back and embrace Glock in a big way. Police departments across the country followed suit. Glock's rise wasn't just a trend, it was a quiet revolution, confirming what many shooters had already figured out. The Glock 17 delivered performance, reliability, and simplicity in one groundbreaking package. It may have finished mid-pack on the 1987 score sheet, but history tells a different story. The Glock 17 went on to redefine what a service pistol should be, and in many circles, it still holds that crown today. The Smith & Wesson 645. The Smith & Wesson 645 ended up as the FBI's top pick during the 1987 trials, an outcome that continues to raise eyebrows among those who've reviewed the actual testing data. Chambered in N45 ACP, the 645 attracted support from agents convinced that larger calibers automatically meant superior stopping power. Yet despite this favoritism, the pistol had notable issues. FBI documents highlighted recurring problems with the safety lever loosening and reliability that lagged behind several of its 9mm rivals. Still, the 645 benefited from glowing marks in categories like perceived stopping power, brand familiarity, and strong factory support. Those subjective positives gave it an edge in a scoring system that, in hindsight, rewarded reputation over raw performance. Some evaluators mentioned the initial double-action trigger pull felt stiff, although follow-up, single-action shots were generally praised for their smoothness. Build quality was certainly solid, but the pistol didn't deliver standout accuracy or long intervals between malfunctions. Ultimately, what seemed to elevate the 645 was the lingering belief in the almighty 45 ACP, a belief that often overshadowed more practical concerns like reliability and shot placement. In the years that followed, both law enforcement and civilian shooters began to see the advantages of modern 9mm platforms, particularly as bullet and firearm technology advanced. But back in 1987, the allure of a big-bore handgun was still strong. So despite its flaws, the 645 rode a wave of .45 enthusiasm straight to the top spot, leaving some firearms experts puzzled and others simply chalking it up to the mindset of the era. The Beretta 92S. Having already proven its worth in the military's ex-Menin evaluations, the Beretta 92S came into the FBI trials with a solid reputation, and it didn't disappoint in terms of reliability. The pistol recorded nearly 1,200 rounds between stoppages, outperforming many competitors by a wide margin. From a performance standpoint, it was clearly one of the standouts. Still, the FBI deducted points for more administrative and subjective concerns. One issue was the perceived difficulty of sourcing parts, as Beretta's overseas manufacturing raised concerns about logistics and resupply. There were also comments about the exposed barrel potentially posing a burn risk during use. The initial double-action trigger pull was considered on the heavy side, though it wasn't unique in that regard. Despite these drawbacks, the 92s delivered excellent results on the FBI qualification course and stood out in practical shooting tests. Its smooth recoil, solid accuracy, and ability to withstand high round counts made it one of the most capable handguns in the lineup. To many in the firearm world, the 92S exemplifies a well-balanced, combat-ready sidearm with a long service life. But during the FBI trials, its final ranking fell short of what its on-paper and on-range performance suggested. Much of that came down to logistical doubts and a hint of bias toward American-made options. While the Beretta 92 would go on to become a mainstay in military and police circles, the FBI's assessment stopped short of giving it the full recognition it arguably deserved. The SIG P220. You'd think a 45 ACP Sauer would be a top-tier pick, but the P220 journey through the FBI evaluation was anything but smooth. One of its biggest setbacks came during drop testing, where it reportedly discharged after hitting the ground, an instant deal breaker for any law enforcement agency. On top of that, the P220 experienced a series of magazine-related malfunctions that raised concerns about reliability. Combined with its heavier recoil and a stiff double-action first trigger pull something several agents found difficult to manage, it quickly fell out of favor. This outcome disappointed those who believed the F45 ACP was inherently superior to 9mm in terms of stopping power. While the P220 had, and still has, a strong fan base among civilian shooters for its accuracy and rugged design, the specific samples tested by the FBI didn't meet the standard. Magazine issues were especially troubling. Any failure to feed or jam during a high-stress encounter could be life-threatening. To make matters worse, the infamous hammer test, where agents struck trigger guards with mallets, caused visible damage to the P220 frame. While that might not reflect typical use, the FBI was looking for extreme durability, and the SIG didn't hold up under that level of abuse as well as some of its competitors. Despite Sig Sauer's stellar reputation, the P220 performance during this particular evaluation left it near the bottom of the rankings, landing in 8th place. It wasn't the worst pistol in the batch, but it definitely didn't live up to expectations. The Ruger P85. Although the P85 had its appeal, it performed poorly in the FBI's 1987 trials. According to some accounts, it suffered serious malfunctions before even hitting the 1,500-round mark. One test unit reportedly failed around 500 rounds in, and another barely made it past 1,000 before experiencing critical problems. That level of unreliability immediately pushed it to the bottom of the FBI's rankings. Law enforcement agencies expect their service pistols to endure harsh conditions and extended use, and the P85, despite its reputation for being tough and overbuilt, just didn't deliver when it mattered most. To be fair, the FBI did acknowledge some of the pistol's strengths, including a competitive price tag and acceptable manufacturer support. But none of that could offset the glaring reliability issues. For a duty weapon, failing before reaching a few thousand rounds is unacceptable, especially when officers' lives depend on their gear functioning under pressure. Accuracy was another weak point. Compared to the other handguns in the trial, the P85 lagged noticeably in precision shooting drills. Its bulky build and awkward ergonomics didn't help either, with testers giving mixed feedback on how it handled. While Ruger would go on to refine the P-series in later iterations, the original P85 didn't inspire much confidence. In a high-stakes evaluation like this, the FBI had little choice but to rank it dead last. It may have improved over time, but in 1987, the P85 simply wasn't ready for prime time. And that wraps up our look at the FBI's controversial 1987 handgun trials, an event meant to crown the best law enforcement sidearm, but one that ended up revealing more about internal biases than actual firearm performance. Loyalty to T5 ACP and resistance to change led the agency to overlook some truly impressive designs. As we've seen, the real standout Glock's groundbreaking 17 eventually earned its place at the top despite being initially underrated. It just took a few years and a shift in mindset for the FBI to catch up with what the shooting world already knew. So how about you? Do you own a Glock 17? Or maybe one of the other handguns featured in this test? What's your experience been like? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tap that little bell icon so you never miss out on more firearms history and reviews. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.